The music stopped when he stepped onto the dance floor. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above a sea of silk gowns and black tuxedos, and in the center of it all stood a man in a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit his broad shoulders. His hands were rough from years of scrubbing marble floors. His shoes were polished, but old. And in front of him, smiling toward the sound of his trembling breath, stood the CEO's blind daughter, the most protected woman in the room. Every whisper in the gala hall carried the same disbelief. The janitor. With her. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that a single brave moment can change a life, take a second to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that the world can still surprise us. Daniel Reyes had never imagined he would be standing beneath chandeliers worth more than his annual salary. Just hours earlier, he had been mopping the very floors that now reflected the glittering lights of the city's most exclusive charity gala. As the night janitor of the towering headquarters of Vail Industries, Daniel was used to being invisible. He cleaned offices long after executives went home. He emptied trash bins filled with discarded ideas scribbled on expensive stationery. He wiped fingerprints off glass walls that separated power from people like him. But Daniel had not always been invisible to the world. Once, he had been a young father with a steady construction job and a wife who believed in his dreams. Life, however, has a way of collapsing without warning. A scaffolding accident shattered his knee and ended his construction career. The medical bills swallowed their savings. The strain swallowed his marriage. His wife left when their son Mateo was only 3, leaving Daniel with a broken leg, a broken heart, and a child who depended on him for everything. For 8 years, Daniel worked 2 jobs whenever his body allowed it. He limped through pain without complaint. He attended every parent-teacher meeting, learned to braid hair for school performances when Mateo had to play a shepherd with a borrowed wig, and stayed up late helping with homework even when exhaustion blurred his vision. Cleaning offices at Vail Industries during the evenings was not glamorous, but it was steady. It paid for rent, groceries, and Mateo's asthma medication. On the night of the gala, Daniel had planned to finish early and slip out quietly. The event was a high-profile fundraiser hosted by CEO Victor Vail, a man whose name was synonymous with power and innovation. The building buzzed with preparations all week. Florists transformed the lobby into a garden of white roses. Caterers filled kitchens with aromas Daniel had only smelled in magazines. Security guards doubled their patrols. Daniel kept his head down, pushing his cart through corridors, careful not to disturb the glittering world unfolding around him. He was in the grand ballroom, polishing a section of marble near the stage, when he heard soft laughter drifting from behind the curtain. It wasn't the polished, performative laughter of guests. It was lighter, freer, almost childlike. Curious, he paused. A young woman stood near the edge of the stage, her hand resting on a cane. Her dress shimmered like starlight, and though her eyes were open, they did not focus on anything in particular. She tilted her head slightly, listening to the orchestra rehearse. Daniel knew who she was. Everyone in the building did. Elena Vail, the CEO's only daughter. She had lost her sight in a car accident at 16, an accident that tabloids dissected for months. Since then, Victor Vail had become fiercely protective, rarely allowing her into public events. Tonight was one of her first appearances in years. Elena stepped forward, misjudging the distance to the edge of the stage. Her heel caught the hem of her gown, and in a split second she began to fall. Daniel didn't think. He dropped his cloth and lunged forward, his injured knee screaming in protest. He caught her just before she hit the polished floor. For a moment, everything stilled. Her hand gripped his sleeve, and he felt her heart racing as fast as his own. Security rushed toward them, but Elena gently assured them she was fine. Daniel tried to step back, embarrassed by the attention, but she did not release his arm immediately. Instead, she smiled in his direction and thanked him, her voice steady and warm. Later that evening, when the ballroom filled with guests and the orchestra swelled into elegant waltzes, Daniel remained near the back wall, blending into the shadows. He had changed into the spare suit he kept in his locker, something he wore to church or special school events. He had no invitation, but the event coordinator, grateful for his help earlier, had quietly allowed him to stay near the entrance in case assistance was needed. Elena stood near the dance floor, listening to the music, her father at her side. Victor Vale's posture was rigid, his expression unreadable. Suitors had approached, men from powerful families eager to win favor with the CEO. But Elena declined each invitation politely. She seemed to be waiting for something, or someone. When the orchestra shifted into a softer melody, Elena turned her face slightly toward the crowd and asked if the man who had caught her earlier was still nearby. Daniel felt every eye in the room swing toward him as a staff member gently guided him forward. He wanted to refuse. He was painfully aware of the whispers. He could almost hear the judgments forming behind polite smiles. A janitor. With her. But then he remembered Mateo's words that morning, when Daniel had complained about his aching knee. Mateo had looked at him seriously and said that heroes still show up even when they hurt. Daniel took Elena's hand. As they stepped onto the dance floor, the orchestra quieted slightly, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Daniel had not danced in years. His body was stiff, cautious. But Elena moved with quiet confidence, following the rhythm through subtle vibrations in the floor and the gentle guidance of his hand at her waist. He described the room to her in a low voice, the chandeliers sparkling like upside-down constellations, the women in gowns of silver and blue, the way the city lights shimmered beyond the glass walls. She listened, smiling, as if he were painting the world for her with words. What began as awkward steps slowly transformed into something beautiful. Daniel forgot the stares. He forgot the whispers. He focused only on the music and the warmth of her hand in his. The crowd's murmurs softened into silence. But Victor Vale was watching. His expression was not anger, as many expected. It was something deeper, something unsettled. When the dance ended, applause erupted, hesitant at first, then genuine. Elena squeezed Daniel's hand and thanked him again, her face radiant. Daniel stepped back, intending to return to his place in the shadows. Instead, Victor Vale approached him. The CEO's presence was commanding, his tailored suit immaculate, his gaze sharp. The room quieted once more, anticipating reprimand or dismissal. Daniel braced himself for humiliation. Victor asked him to follow. They stepped onto the stage together. Cameras turned. Phones lifted. The orchestra fell silent. Victor cleared his throat and began to speak about the purpose of the gala, about innovation, resilience, and the power of perspective. Then his voice shifted, becoming more personal. He spoke about the night of Elena's accident, about the guilt he carried for pushing her to attend a business event instead of letting her stay home with friends. He admitted that in his obsession with building an empire, he had often overlooked the simple human moments that truly mattered. He then revealed a secret that stunned the entire gala. The charity foundation being launched that night was not merely a tax-deductible gesture or a public relations move. It was a deeply personal initiative. Victor had been searching for someone to lead it, someone who understood hardship not from a boardroom but from lived experience. Someone who knew what it meant to fight quietly, without applause. For months, Victor had watched Daniel through security reports and staff commendations. He had learned about the janitor who never missed a shift, who often brought leftover catering food home for his son instead of taking it for himself, who once used his own limited savings to help a coworker avoid eviction. He had known about Daniel long before that dance. Victor announced that the foundation would focus on supporting single parents rebuilding their lives after injury or financial collapse. And he invited Daniel Reyes to serve as its community director. The room erupted, not in laughter, but in astonished applause. Daniel felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath him. He tried to protest, to explain that he was unqualified, that he was just a janitor. But Victor shook his head gently and said that empathy, resilience, and integrity were qualifications that could not be taught in business school. Elena stepped forward and took Daniel's hand once more, smiling as if she had known all along. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's life transformed, but not in the way fairy tales often promise. He did not become wealthy overnight. He did not move into a mansion. Instead, he attended meetings in modest suits, learning about budgets and outreach programs. He shared his story publicly, voice trembling at first, then growing steadier. He helped design initiatives that provided vocational training for injured workers and childcare support for single parents. Mateo watched his father on stage at community centers and small conferences, pride shining in his young eyes. For the first time, Daniel felt seen not for his uniform, but for his heart. His friendship with Elena deepened slowly. They met for coffee in quiet corners of the city. He described sunsets to her, and she described music in ways that made him hear notes he had never noticed before. Their bond was not built on rescue or pity, but on mutual respect. Daniel's knee still ached on rainy days. Bills still required careful planning. But something fundamental had shifted. The invisible man had stepped into the light, not because he demanded it, but because he had shown up with kindness when no one was watching. And perhaps that was Victor Vale's greatest revelation. Power was not proven by dominance, but by the courage to elevate others. If this story has touched your heart so far, take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and let us know in the comments what part moved you the most. Your engagement helps stories like Daniel's reach more people who might be losing hope. As the months turned into a year, the foundation helped hundreds of families. Daniel stood once again beneath chandeliers at the next annual gala, but this time, he stood as a speaker, not a janitor in the shadows. When the orchestra began to play, he turned toward Elena and asked if she would like to dance. She smiled, already knowing his answer before he finished the question. Before we close this story, I have a special request. Comment the word, kindness, below if you believe small acts can change destinies. Because sometimes, the most powerful transformations don't begin with wealth or status. They begin with a single brave step onto a dance floor, a hand extended without expectation, and a heart willing to see beyond titles. And in a world obsessed with who stands at the top, it was a janitor who reminded everyone that true greatness is measured not by what we own, but by how we love.